Yo, what up? How's it going? And welcome back for another video. Today's video, we're going to be doing an LCS Spring 2020 power rankings in the form of a tier list. Alrighty, so let's get started. So before we start putting teams into tiers and stuff like that, we're going to go one at a time. I kind of did this before I started filming, so I kind of know where I want to put things, but haven't really put my thoughts out there. I have the rosters pulled up on my other monitor, so we'll be taking a look at the other rosters, all the rosters, and talking about them and stuff like that. I'm going to be putting them in the tiers, but I'll give them rankings. I'll give them number rankings as well. But especially in the LCS this year, a lot of teams, honestly, are really hard to gauge the strength of them. There's a lot of teams that seem to be pretty close to each other. And they seem to be in a bunch of different groups of perceived team strength, right? You know, only time will tell, but, you know, perceived team strength. And we're going to be ranking these not in order of how strong they are now, or how they will perform in the first couple of weeks. This is what I think they'll finish, right? How strong I think they'll be at the end of spring. Wow. I'm like holding in a burp this whole time. Anyways, cool. So let's just go ahead and get started. So the first team we're going to be putting up is, we're going to start at the top, by the way. Team Liquid. Wow, that was such a shock, right? Right. I bet nobody put Team Liquid as the number one team on their tier list. And if you're looking at this and you're like, but TSM, but Cloud9, but CLG, they all made improvements. You got to put respect on the name, right? Look at Team Liquid. You got to put respect on the name. I mean, they had the best roster last year, and then they arguably upgraded their best roster again. Only time will tell whether the Xmithy Broxa move is going to be like this really great improvement to their team. It kind of looks like it probably will be. Probably a slight improvement to their team. Or maybe it'll be a complete flop, like whenever, you know, TSM let go of Doublelift. I mean, the most famous flop of all time. Maybe it will be like that, but there's no reason to suggest that it will. Like, there's no reason at all to suggest that adding Broxa to their already championship lineup will make them a weaker team. If anything, it's the same or better. There's no reason to believe that it would be worse. And if you want to say anything about early game shot calling or anything like that, honestly, when people start bringing up shot calling, my mind goes numb when anybody brings up, but Xmithy's shot calling. He shot calls. Honestly, if you're a top level jungler, you know what you should be doing in the early game. And if you're not an emotional player, you know, like someone like a Cadian or something like that, who has some good moments, but seems to play off of emotion, like whether he's feeling good about the game or not. And we'll talk more about that whenever we get down to some of the other teams. But Broxa doesn't seem much like an emotional player, anything like that. Just seems like a smart, well put together player, much like Xmithy. So there's no reason to believe that it should be a downgrade for some of the naysayers out there. So already have the best bottom lane in the entire league, bar none. Best bottom lane in the entire league. I think Sven and Vulcan are going to maybe try to challenge that a little bit in lane, but you know, you got to put respect on Doublelift and CoreJJ. You got the best weak side, one of the best weak side top laners in the world. Weak side top laner, very important to know. You know, top 2 in the league for sure. In impact, you got top 2 mid laner for sure, and your jungler is easily going to be top 3. Obviously, right now they're having visa issues, so Pobutzer is going to be their jungler, which is, you know, not what you want. But they're going to get that figured out, and we're talking about end of season strength. So anyways, we have Team Liquid, and we're going to put them alone in the S tier because they're just a cut above all the rest of the teams right now. That's not to mean that the improvements that some other teams have made isn't going to be able to overtake Team Liquid. They for sure can, right? Both TSM and Cloud9 were very close to overtaking Team Liquid last year, and they both arguably improved their rosters. So, yeah, so totally they could not be number one, but there's no reason to not put them number one right now. See what I mean? All odds are in their favor, but definitely another team could overtake them. All right, you know, you may have been paying attention where my mouse has been going. Okay, we're going to do the next team. And the next team is going to be put into A tier, and it's going to be TSM. It's going to be TSM. Wow. It's going to be TSM. Wow. All right, let's talk about their roster, and let's talk about why we put them here. So their roster this year is Broken Blade, Dardoch, Bjergsen, Kabe, and Biofrost. And then if we look at what their roster was last year, it was Broken Blade, Acadian and Grig, Bjergsen, Sven, Smoothie, and then their coach was Ziggs, and they switched out for Peter Zhang, who was also the coach of the team last year as well. Okay, so let's talk about the improvements that we've made. So we obviously still have Broken Blade and Bjergsen, who were the best players on the team last year, for sure. For sure, were the best players on the team last year. Broken Blade was great in spring and then didn't have such a great summer, but I think that, honestly, this sounds kind of weird, but anytime you hear Broken Blade talk or you watch his streams or you kind of just watch how the games play out, I really think his performance was impacted by the jungle, and I really hate to say that because I think Acadian and Grig are both good players, but I really think his summer performance kind of dwindled from the jungler performance as well. It really feels that way. You know, I don't know all the intangibles. I don't see the scrim play and stuff like that, but that's what it felt like to me watching it. And when I hear how Broken Blade talks about the game and I watch how he plays, it seems like he's definitely got it. I watch a lot of his streams and stuff like that. So it definitely seems like he's got it. And there were some games and some situations where I definitely felt like there was an issue with the jungler causing Broken Blade to not look as good. We're not talking about the first couple of weeks in spring where Broken Blade was kind of inting a couple games because he played very good the rest of spring, but then was kind of mediocre in summer. But I think that was more of a team issue and more of a jungle issue than it was a Broken Blade issue. Okay, and then we have Bjergsen still on the team, obviously. Put the respect on the name. Nothing to say about Bjergsen. If you watch spring and you'd watch him 1v9 games like that Akali play where he flanked behind the enemy team, this guy still got it. There's no reason to suggest that he doesn't. He didn't have a great summer, but nobody on TSM had a great summer. I think they're having a lot of team issues, specifically around their jungler. And, you know, as a team as a whole, but I think they're having really big issues with the jungle. You know, hashtag just TSM things, you know what I'm saying? Cool. And now let's talk about some of the people that have been replaced. So Acadian and Grig have been replaced. Grig didn't play very much. Actually, last year, he played a couple games early on in summer, and then they kind of alternated in spring as well. He had a couple good Hecarim games, but that was about it. And the team never decided to go with him. And then at the end of the year, he ended up filling in for top lane for the academy team. So it never really worked out. We'll talk more about Grig whenever we get to Dig. We'll talk more about him whenever we get over there and what I think about Grig. Acadian. So Acadian had a great spring and played really well with Broken Blade in spring after, you know, the first couple weeks after Broken Blade was trying to getting his ints out of the way, getting his tactical ints out of the way. I'm a big follower of Acadian. I watch a lot of his streams. I've followed him closely as a player since Echo Fox days. And he definitely feels like an emotionally driven player. And I talked about, Broxa and Xmithy don't really come off as an emotionally driven player in terms of their decision making in game. And what I mean by that, I don't mean Acadian's like angry or, lashing out at his teammates or anything like that. What I really mean by that is he seems very impressionable and seems like he can lose his confidence easy. And when he does, then he doesn't make his great decisions. I don't know if you guys have ever felt that way, but like whenever you're doing something and you do something and you know that you maybe shouldn't be doing this and you do it anyways, like maybe you're playing a game of League or maybe you're playing basketball, something like that. And then as soon as you do it, you knew why you knew why it went wrong, and you hate yourself because you did it. Like you hate yourself because you just did the thing that you knew was wrong, but you did it because it was the easier decision for you to make, because your confidence was shocked. And then you hate yourself and you keep spiraling and spiraling and spiraling. Acadian has always struck me as a player that has that problem, or just a person that has that problem. And you hear how he talks on stream. You hear all the TSM content whenever you're, hearing about it, kind of like how Mike Young was when he was on the team. And they were like, I'm just trying to find my footing. I think I feel really good about it right now. And then other times they're not doing so hot. He definitely feels like an emotionally driven player. And the whole team environment seemed to be kind of falling apart in summer, and specifically around jungle. And I think he's a great player, and he's going to be him and Greg are doing somewhere else again at doing on Dig now. So yeah, I think Acadian's a great player, but he's just trying to figure shit out, But Dardoch, all right. Anybody who's watched Dardoch play will know Dardoch is amazing. And, I'm going to say this. I truly believe that he's gotten over his immaturity issues. In preparation for this year, as soon as he got signed on TSM, I've never actually watched the Team Liquid documentary with Point Break or whatever, or Breaking Point, not Point Break. I watched that full documentary, and yeah, he looked like a fucking child in that, acting like a child, right? And I really think he's gotten over a lot of that stuff. No, there were no horror stories coming from Optic. Whenever anybody getting interviewed from Optic and stuff like that, everybody seemed to be pretty positive on Dardoch. And I've even listened to a lot of podcasts where they're talking about like he wasn't taking it seriously. He locked in. I listened to a Loco Doco podcast. I don't want to like burn him too hard, but they're like, he locked in Yasuo in Yasuo jungle and blah, blah, blah. And people were like, yeah, he's trolling an academy. Their team was eliminated from the playoffs, and it was the last game of the year whenever he locked in Yasuo, by the way. And the game before, their whole team trolled as well because they had been eliminated from going to the playoffs that year, and there were only 2 games left. So I don't know what anybody's on about, because that was like a thing I was seeing out there after that podcast a lot. People was like, he didn't take academy seriously. He locked in Yasuo jungle. And I'm like, well, their whole team wasn't taking it seriously. They got eliminated from academy with 2 games left in the year, and their team's about to disband. Who cares? Like, their team is literally about to disband next week. Who cares? You know what I mean? So I don't believe in that narrative that he just like didn't care in academy and stuff like that. So there's been no horror stories coming from that. There's been no negative press around Dardoch really in like past 3 years, other than the thing I just talked about. He was on Echo Fox before, and that whole team was kind of demolishing itself. Everybody knows what has gone on at Echo Fox now. So I don't fault him for any of that. So all signs look to Dardoch being a great fit on TSM. Broken Blade, I've watched his streams a lot. He says he loves playing with him. He says he has full confidence in him. I listened to his stream the other day, and he was talking about playing with Dardoch. The difference between playing with Dardoch and junglers he's had before is that whenever Broken Blade decides to want to do a play with his jungler, he knows 100% in his mind that Dardoch is going to perform it exactly how he thinks it's going to happen. Like exactly what Sejuani is supposed to do in this situation. He knows that it's going to be done full correctly, no issues, every single time. And so that's really good to hear from someone who's been playing with him now. So I have full confidence in Dardoch. And that's why big part of the reason why I have TSM so highly right here. Okay, let's talk about Kabe for Sven. I think a lot of people have been hating on Sven for, he has those couple of plays where everybody's seen, the Ezreal play, right? But they could forget all the good plays Sven has made throughout his time on TSM, and that Sven has been top 3, top 4 AD carry the entire time he's been on TSM. And so I think people need to remember that Sven is a great player, like legit a great player. And look, it just didn't work out. And totally entered that last game in spring, but a player isn't defined by one play that they make. He's made plenty of other great plays. So I think Sven is a great player, and I think Kabe is a very similar player to Sven in the sense of he's not really a laning AD carry. He's more of a teamfight AD carry. He's more of a weak side AD carry. You can play to him or you can play off of him. Just a very kind of a neutral AD carry, not really too aggressive, not too passive either. Plays the matchups how they're supposed to play out. And does super well in team fights. Team plays around him. You get a lead. He's going to carry the game and end the game for you correctly how it's supposed to go. So I see Kabe as just Sven, but younger. I'm not really sure on their ages actually, but in terms of their career length, I just see Kabe as a younger Sven, either a side grade or an upgrade. I don't see the downside in Kabe at all. So I don't see any downside here. And I think their bot lane was already good. I think TSM already had a pretty decent bot lane. They obviously had their issues, and at the end of summer, I think the whole team was just having issues, though. All right, cool. Now let's talk about Biofrost for Smoothie. I'm a huge fan of this trade for TSM. Huge fan. I think this is a massive upgrade. Okay, Biofrost, much better laning support than Smoothie is. Not that necessarily TSM is going to necessarily play around the bottom lane, but they might. They definitely could. much better laning support, and that does all the things that Smoothie could do. Is great in team fights, isn't necessarily quite as vocal. But why do you need that when you have Bjergsen, Broken Blade, you have Dardoch, all people who want to talk on that team? So, and it's not like he can't talk. And from everything you hear from COG, he was doing a lot of the talking there anyways. And they wanted to get someone more talkative. That's why they made the trade for Smoothie. And I think a lot of people have this weird perception of shot calling, what it is. The age of like having a shot caller, like a pure shot caller on your team is completely dead. It's been dead for a while. When you think back at days of like, all the way back with Chowster, and then Aframu and, people like that who are like legendary shot callers, they shot call for their team. That league was a much younger game whenever that was happening. And it was actually a real thing that one player could have much more knowledge about the game than the rest of your team. That's not a real thing now. There might be one player on your team who's pretty new and maybe doesn't have quite as much knowledge as everybody else. But having one player who is like the brain of your team and everybody else is just a bunch of dumb idiots is not a real thing anymore. What is a real thing and which will always be a real thing for teams in all professional sports is sometimes you have to have somebody to be the voice of the team or somebody to have to be the person who has the confidence to bring everybody together when things are going bad. Like, okay, guys, let's focus up. What can we get here? Let's look for this. That is a leadership ability. That's not shot calling. That's like a leadership. That's just being a team leader. And they already have plenty of that. And from everything I've heard about Smoothie, and when you listen to the comms with Smoothie, it's not really that. It's more of just, honestly, guys, when you listen to the comms, it sounds a lot more just like him yelling out the team fight stuff. Like, Varus, focus Varus. All right, guys, my TP is up. Or blah, blah, blah. It's just like he's just very talkative, very informative about what's going on in the team fights and stuff like that, but not really like the structuring the strategy of the team, which that's a lot of what like Broken Blade or someone like Bjergsen can do, or someone like Dardoch. Early game shot calling is a very real thing and is usually led by the jungler and support. That is a very real thing because they're the only people moving around the map, and you have to make plays with your jungler, is how the entire early game works. So that is a very real thing. But the whole idea that you have to have someone on your team that is the pure brains and the rest of the people are just idiots, and this guy knows everything about League of Legends macro and is going to run it for your team. If that is something happening on your team, you're a very bad team in this day and age. That used to be a thing. It is not a thing anymore. So stop saying like, but he's shot calling. Okay, sometimes that is a skill that you want for your team. When you have 4 people on your team that don't have the confidence to speak over everybody else. What is a skill now for players is just having a team leader. And TSM is not losing any of that. That's the whole point of me saying this, is that like people will say like, oh, but you lose Smoothie's shot calling. Why do you need it when you have Bjergsen and Broken Blade who love talking, who love taking charge, and then someone like Dardoch who's going to get you through the early game, and Bifrost is, in my opinion, a better player than Smoothie. And the results have been showing that he's been playing much better than Smoothie the past 2 years. And I would think arguably the past 3 years, the whole time they've been, both in the league. So that whole shot calling angle, it bothers me when people bring it up. I think it's only important whenever, you don't already have a good team leader on the team. I think just being a team leader, like someone like Aframu is a good team leader. Someone like Bjergsen is a good team leader. Someone like Doublelift is a good team leader nowadays. So I think just having a good team leader is important, not necessarily somebody yelling out stuff in team fights constantly, because anybody can do that. Anybody with a brain, and all these guys have brains. So anyways, cool. So that's all I'll say about that. So from everything I can see with this team, everything is upgraded. That was pretty long-winded, me talking about TSM. So let's move on to the next team, and it's going to be... Who is it going to be? Oh, wow, it's Cloud9. Oh, wow, it's Cloud9, guys. Before we move on to Cloud9, something that's important that I want to talk about is when you're looking at a team like TSM and Team Liquid, the reason why I have them cut above Cloud9, at least, but we'll talk more about Cloud9 in a second, is they have so many different ways to win the game. And when you look at roster building, you don't just look at individual talent. You got to look at how you actually win the game as a team, depending on the meta, obviously, and stuff like that. But when you look at a team like TSM, for example, and Team Liquid obviously has this, is they have so many different ways they can win the game. If the meta is solo lane focused, they can play through their solos. They can play through Broken Blade. They can play through Bjergsen. You can play with your jungler and get leads that way. You can play weak side bottom lane if that's what's important. If you're playing for Rift Herald, stuff like that, explode into a split push with your Rift Herald plays and stuff like that. Or you can totally get play with mid, have weak side Broken Blade on Aatrox or something like that. You definitely can play weak side Aatrox. And you play, Aatrox, for example. And then you can play Dardoch with Bjergsen, jungle mid 2v2, get a lead, take that lead into bottom river, get the dragons, force through bottom, get your bot lane ahead, mid-game team fight, pick mid-game champions with a weak side top laner. There's so many ways you can win the game with this team, and it seems like non-meta dependent. You can play through solos, you can play through bottom by getting your mid solo ahead or just supporting your bottom lane. There's so many ways for this team to win, and that's why this roster looks really, really good. And that's why Team Liquid's roster looks really good. So now let's talk about Cloud9. Let's see if that's true for them. I need to look more about the roster a little bit. All right, so we have Licorice still on the team. Probably the best top laner in the league. Definitely top 2, top 3, if not just outright the best. And nothing to suggest that he's not that anymore. In some of the meta, honestly, guys, everybody thinks it's really bot lane focused meta, but I'm telling you, you can totally play weak side bottom lane and just play for solos, Rift Herald, and play for a split push, sack the first 2 dragons. That's totally a viable strategy. Not saying that's what's going to happen right now, but it's totally a viable strategy. Is to play around your solos. Totally a viable strategy and might become the meta. I think it'll take a little bit of time, but I think it eventually will become the meta to play around your solos and play around Rift Herald rather than dragons. Dragons are useless. 4 dragons are good, but if you sack the dragons in the early game, if you sack the dragons in the early game while you get 4 plates top, 3 plates mid with your Rift Herald, and then you're just so out of control ahead, the enemy team that went for the 2 dragons will never come back unless they are winning in other departments, right? They'll never be able to get 4 dragons. So definitely can play just solo lane, around solo lane, stuff like that. So, okay, so we have Licorice. Obviously, Svenskeren got traded to EG, and we have Blabber. And that's going to be the big talking point for this team is the Blabber switch up. I don't know how I feel about this. I definitely think this is a downgrade for the team, and I think they'll have to be figuring this stuff out a little bit more because largely how Cloud9 won every single game was the way Svenskeren would find plays, specifically around mid lane, and how he would empower Niski to play through the game. And, a lot of people look at, whenever Niski didn't have Svenskeren, he did not look as good. And from all the pro players in the league and from everything you hear from interviews and everything you hear from streams and from all the players, it definitely felt like Svenskeren was doing most of the work for that mid 2v2 and was making Niski look very good. And from my perspective, when I was watching the games, that's how it felt to me too. When I'd see plays, I was like, wow, he's really making this happen for him. And, they're getting these big leads and to Niski's credit, would take the leads and do something very good with them, but weren't very good at getting them on his own. And whenever Niski played with Blabber, obviously there were some issues with them not playing as much together, but it didn't look the same. You know what I mean? So I'm a little bit skeptical, but Blabber's a great jungler. He definitely deserves a spot in the league. I think he can easily be top half of the jungle pool. So that's why I still have this team up here. I am a little bit skeptical about how Niski's going to do without Svenskeren on the team, because a lot of times Niski was looking like the best mid laner in the league, but I think that was largely due to what Svenskeren was doing for him. So we just talked about Niski and Blabber, so let's go on down here. We have Sven and Vulcan. Okay, I think this is a weird move, and I think this is a huge upgrade in terms of what they can actually do with their team. I think Niski, or not Niski, I think Sneaky is a great player, by the way. And I think Sneaky and Sven have very different skills. Have some different skills, but some that are the same. I think in terms of if you're just looking at talent level, I think they're pretty similar. Pretty similar players. They don't play heavily through lane. They play more for teamfight focus. I think Sven gives you a little bit more options in lane than a Sneaky would. And to be fair, Sneaky was playing with Zazel, who's not a very good laning support either. So, and in the past, Sneaky was a little bit better in lane, but I think Sven offers you a little bit more in lane and a little bit more ability to play through him in the earlier stages of the game. And I think the way Sneaky played was largely because their team was playing around Niski so much with Svenskeren, and they played weak side bottom lane. So I'm not faulting Sneaky at all. I think this is a side grade, honestly, with Sven. I think it's really a side grade. And As long as you use a side grid. That's about all you could say about that. And I already talked about intangibles with shot calling and stuff like that. I don't care. All right, but now we look down at Vulcan. I think Vulcan is such a huge upgrade over Zeyzal. Such a huge upgrade. Zeyzal so much better in lane, so much better in the early game, and is just as good in team fights and stuff like that. Zeyzal, on the other hand, that dude makes some great flank plays, makes some great engages with Alistair. I think I'll know a lot of people are Zeyzal fans. I'm fine with Zeyzal. I do think he's very weak in lane and very weak in the early game, moving around with his jungler. And I think Vulcan is very good at very good mechanically. Like when you watch him play, it's really flawlessly. When you watch the lane fights, it looks very flawless, especially on Rakan, stuff like that. Vulcan looks very, very, very good. So I'm really hyped on Vulcan for this team. And that's largely why I have this team up here. It'll be interesting to see how some of their intangible works, like in-game leaders, since they lose Sneaky and stuff like that. I do think having an in-game leader is important. I know I just did a whole spiel about why I think people when they say shot calling, when they say they lost their shot caller, why I think that's a stupid statement. But I think maybe they might have a lack of a team leader and kind of a lack of a team identity, and they'll have to figure that out a little bit, but I think they will. I don't know how they will, but they will. And they're going to be a very good team, definitely challenging for first place, second or third, for sure. All right, we're going to speed this up a little bit more because I talked so much about the first three teams. All right, next team we're going to do is CLG, and they're going to be in the B tier. CLG is in the B tier. Cool. So I have CLG just a cut below TSM and Cloud9. I definitely could have just done the tier list like this as well. I think maybe this may be better way to do this. But I think Cloud9 is better than CLG, and I think CLG is better than all of these teams. And I think TSM is just slightly better than CLG in my view, or slightly better than Cloud9 in my view. And I think honestly, these three teams could be somewhat interchangeable. I think more these two, and then these two as well. I think Cloud9 is just a little bit behind both TSM and Team Liquid, but a little bit closer to TSM than they are to CLG. So I think they're closer to TSM than they are to CLG is why I have them up here. It's a good way of saying it. All right, let's talk about CLG's roster. So they have Ruin, and let's talk about Ruin. Ruin was very decent. It surprised me greatly that he made the All-Pro team, honestly. They had him play weak side quite a bit, and then they would play through him quite a bit. It was hard to see him ever get his own advantages. As far as all the pro players that have played with him, they seem to have a high opinion, and the coaching staff that's played with him seem to have a high opinion of him. When I watch him play, I watched him play in the TTL a little bit, and then when he played here, it just seemed, I don't know, it was weird. He would have some good play, like in positive matchups he'd play well, in negative matchups he would not play well. He just seemed kind of average to me. And did some good plays in team fights with like Rumble and Kennen. If my memory serves me correct, I would see, I remember seeing good plays from him. But I'm just kind of like lukewarm on Ruin, if I'm being completely honest. And then we have Wiggly right here. I think people were really hyped on Wiggly. I think he definitely deserves to be in the league and could be a top half jungler. I'm pretty lukewarm on Wiggly as well. I was hyped on him coming into the league. I was like, yes, this is nice. He's finally getting his chance. I think he can be very good, and this might be his year. I think last year was a very good learning experience for him, and getting his confidence on stage and just getting his confidence is just growing into an adult and stuff like that. I think that's some of the stuff he's probably struggling with, confidence issues maybe. I don't really know, but that's just the feel I get from when I watch him play and when I hear interviews and when I watch CLG content. That's just kind of the feeling I get, and he's just like growing up with the team, I feel like. And I'm pretty lukewarm on Wiggly. I think he definitely could be great, could be a top half jungler. So I think both Ruin and Wiggly could be top half in their position. And last year, from all perspectives, they were. But I'm pretty lukewarm on them, if I'm being completely honest. I think top 5 in their position, if I'm being completely honest. Okay, and now we look at mid. We have Crown for Power of Evil. I think Crown is a big upgrade. I think Crown does a lot of stuff that Power of Evil does, but better. I think he's just a better player. I think he's better in lane. I think he's better in team fights. Not that Power of Evil is bad, but I think Power of Evil, I think a lot of people are hot on Power of Evil since his Misfits days. The game is very different than it was on Misfits, than when he was on Misfits. That was the Ardent Sensor meta last time he was on Misfits. And ever since then, ever since the meta has switched to melee champions in the mid lane, Power Evil just felt like an average mid laner since then. And I think he's growing back into it and he's having to relearn some of the stuff. He seemed like a very great Orianna player, Syndra player, control mage player. And since some of the control mages have left the meta last year, he's had a little bit of trouble keeping up with the game pace. And Crown is, he is a very similar player to that. But dude, that's where Crown lives. Crown lives in playing weak side. Crown lives in farming perfectly and playing the team fights well. That's where he's always lived. Even when the meta didn't suit, even when people were playing control mages, he that's where he was. He was the farm style, that type of stuff, who could play aggressive. He plays a lot of Talon. Actually, I think just Crown's just a better Power of Evil. And, if you have a world championship and one doesn't have a world championship and you're a similar type of player, I'm going to take the one who has a world championship and has been playing better recently as well. So I think Crown's just a big upgrade, actually. And he had some good split push games on Rise last year on Optic. And I think Optic was just a bad team, so I don't fault him for how that team went last year. Cool. We still have Stixay. Stixay's a great AD carry, easily top 4 for sure, maybe top 3. So there we go. He's still there. So the smoothie for Biofrost, I definitely think Biofrost is the better player. And if you listen to the Dive podcast when they were doing the power rankings, they talked a lot about this as well. And I completely agree with this, that what this team lacks a lot is a team leader, someone who's willing to speak for the team and stuff like that. And Smoothie is a person who can fill that role. So a team leader is someone like Smoothie that can come in, because you look at Ruin and Crown, they're Korean, so they're going to be able to command over a team in an alternate language. It's going to be hard for them to do. And it doesn't really seem to suit their personality either. Wiggly, definitely not that type of player. Stixay, definitely not that type of player either. And then Biofrost is not that type of player either. Biofrost can do that, but he's not really that type of player to be the full voice of the team. I think he did that for them last year, but it's kind of out of his comfort zone for him even as well. So Smoothie, that seems to be right in his wheelhouse. So everybody from COG has been saying that they wanted this trade, they wanted this, and this is an upgrade for them. And I really do think it is an upgrade for them, even though I think Biofrost is a much better player than Smoothie. I think them getting a team leader actually does improve the team, and you get Crown, who I think is a much better player than Power of Evil, if I'm being completely honest. I think Power of Evil is decent, but I think Crown is a much better player, if I'm being completely honest with you. Okay, now we have to do the next team. Evil Geniuses. We're going to put them in C tier. We're putting them in C tier. I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of problems with where I put Evil Geniuses. Anybody who watches this, I think you're going to have a lot of issues with this. But hear me out for just a second. I'm very skeptical of their roster. Before we talk about their roster, I think their roster has a really high ceiling and could be here. Wow, they could be there. Wow, wouldn't that be great? But I also think their low point is probably here. But I think what they will do is also probably here or here. I was really debating either here or here. And I think they are closer to COG. I think they are closer to COG than they are to a team like Dig or something like that. I'm going to put them in B tier. But I am putting them behind COG. So just know that. So I'm not, not getting scared to put them low. But I think they do belong in B tier. I think this is their lowest point, and I think this is their highest point, honestly, with this roster. So let's talk about the roster. So top lane, we got Kuhmo. And if you don't know who Kuhmo is, he's the Academy top laner for Cloud9 last year. He played a couple games when Licorice was out for his rock climbing injury on his wrist. So he played a couple games. He did not play well. They played through him a lot of the games to make him feel comfortable, and he played fine when he got advantages. When he didn't get advantages, he would fall 30 CS behind, get killed in lane, that type of stuff. But, he was thrown into on stage without ever playing a stage game, kind of abruptly because, Licorice unexpectedly, he was having some wrist issues, but then he hurt himself rock climbing. So, I don't fault him at all for that. And I think this player, when I watched him play in the scouting grounds 2 years ago. And he looked very good. He looked like the best player. That's when his name was League still. Was his name League before? I think his name was League before. But I watched him play there. He looked so good, and that's when he got drafted over to Cloud9. and he seemed really good in Academy. I watched a couple of the Academy games, and he played fine in LCS. He definitely looked like, if he was like an LCS player then, I would have said he's bottom 3 in the league. So whenever he played, he looked like bottom 3 in the league. But also he only played a couple games, and it was kind of abrupt. And, I think he's got to learn. He's a new player that has to learn, and the team doesn't necessarily have to play around him. I think he's probably going to have to learn how to play weak side with this team, and try to make that work. And maybe he'll end up playing strong side eventually, but I don't know. So Kuhmo, probably bottom half of the league in top laners. If I'm being completely honest, probably bottom half of the league. Svenskeren, MVP of the league, best jungler in the league. Probably. If he's not the best jungler in the league this year, he definitely was last year. For sure. Bar none, best jungler last year. Bar none. He was 100% the reason why Cloud9 did well last year. And I have no problems. I'll fight anyone to death for that. I love Svenskeren. I think he's such a great player. I love him. He's great. I love him. And he's going to be great on this team. There's no reason to suggest he wouldn't be good. And I think Svenskeren just speaks for himself. There's nothing I need to say about him more. Jizuke. All right, Jizuke. If you're unfamiliar with Jizuke because you only watch LCS, he was the Vitality mid laner on their Worlds run 2 years ago, and was also the Vitality mid laner last year as well. Vitality did not do well last year. Definitely Jizuke was... Jizuke on Vitality is either the best or the second best player. Kabashard's probably the best player on Vitality. And then Jizuke after that. Vitality is a very weird team. They just redid everything though this year, but they're a very weird team. And Jizuke was one of the parts of that team that actually worked and can function outside of Vitality. Kabashard being the other part of the team. Kabashard's very good as well, but we're not talking about Gabo. Jizuke plays a lot of those Niski type champions, the melee champions, the assassins, champions that can go into a sideline like Echo, that type of stuff. That's a Jizuke special. So honestly, with this team, Svenskeren and Jizuke could just run it back with what he was doing with Niski. And honestly, if I had to pick, I keep saying honestly, if I had to pick a player, if I had to pick between Jizuke and Niski by themselves, I'd pick Jizuke. I think that one's kind of tough, but I'd pick Jizuke. So I think they can definitely just run it back, play weak side in the side lanes, run it back, getting mid ahead, and just take that lead wherever you want to. So this team actually has a way they can win the game. And that's why I think this roster building was okay. I think some of the roster has a little bit of issue with it. With Kuhmo being the top laner, that's really scary for me. I think he could be a great player, but if he ends up just getting demolished by the likes of Broken Blade, Licorice, and someday Hooni, Haunter, Soaz, Impact, Viper, geez, there's some good top laners. Ruin. If he starts having trouble with those guys and just getting so stuffed and not able to actually play the weak side correctly, then this team will have some trouble because of the next two players on the roster. So we have Bang and Zeyzal. Okay, I'm a little skeptical about this bottom lane because if you hear the things that Sneaky has said, and when you actually watch Cloud9 play, Zeyzal is not a very good player in lane. I think he's a good player. He has some amazing engages on Alistair. Find some really awesome flanks and stuff like that. But everything you hear around the team and everything you see on the gameplay, Sneaky has said a lot when he defends himself that, he wasn't enabled on Cloud9 with, the way the team played and also the way his support played. It made him look worse. And analysts have agreed that. And when I watch it as well, looks like that to me a little bit as well. Zeyzal's not very good in lane, and neither is Bang. Bang is a very, he's much like, Sven, Kabe, that type of player. Bang is amazing in team fights. I remember when Kaisa was first released and I was watching their series and I barely knew what Kaisa did because she just got released. And I watched him engage, use his killer instinct on 3 people by himself. Just Kaisa things. In the middle of a team fight, jump in, and when I was watching it, I was like, what is he doing? And the casters, Papa Smithy and Atlas were like, what is he doing? He is a madman. And he goes in and triple kills them. And I was just like, oh my God, this guy's so clean. And he dodged every skill shot. This dude is clean. This dude is good. There's a reason why he's won multiple world championships, not just because he had Faker on his team, right? You can't just have Faker on your team and win the whole thing. They can't do it now. So Bang is legit a good player, but he's more of a player like a Sven, like a Kabe, like a Cody Sun. They farm up and they fight in the mid game and then in team fights and they play it perfectly. That's the type of player he is. And it scares me a little bit that they're going to have to play weak side bottom lane and they're going to also have to play weak side top lane. It really seems like their whole roster is only going to function just the way I see it right now. Kuhmo could just be a standout this year. The way I see it right now, it'll only function how Cloud9 functioned at the end of last year, purely playing mid jungle and then having weak side bottom lane, and then having a top laner that you can either decide to build a draft to play through as well, or he can play weak side. The issue with this team, it just seems like a worse Cloud9 of last year. The worst Cloud9 of last year, because you don't have Licorice in the top lane who you can play around. So I think this team depends a lot on what happens with Kuhmo. If he's a standout this year, or if he's terrible, or if he's an average player. If he's an average player, this team is top 4. If Kuhmo is a standout, this team could challenge for a championship. Like, whoa. But if he's bad, this team is going to be, fighting for playoffs. So, I think this team depends on a lot of what happens with Kuhmo. And if Svenskeren and Jizuke are able to make that magic happen that Svenskeren had with Niski last year, if they're able to make that happen, they'll be a great team. But if not, yikes. Okay, let's do our next team. A lot of these next teams, by the way, are going to be very close to each other. I've been having a lot of trouble putting these teams up here. I'm going to just do them one at a time. I think they're all about the same, but I'll number them for you. Oh, let's find it. Okay, so I'll just say the teams I'm having trouble with. Having trouble with Dignitas, 100 Thieves, and Immortals. I'm having trouble where I should place them. And so I'm just going to make an executive decision here. And I'm going to select Dignitas. We're doing Dignitas. Team Dignitas. Actually, we're doing Immortals. You go back here, Dig. We're going to do Immortals as the next team. But all those teams are going to be in C tier. All right, let's go ahead and put them in order. We're going to do Dignitas, 100 Thieves. And then we'll do these two last. Let's do these two last. Okay, let's talk about Immortals. Okay, Immortals has Soaz. Everybody should know who Soaz is. One of the most famous top winners of all time. Did not have a good year last year, but they had a bad year. That whole Misfits roster had a bad year. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up right now because I feel like I need to talk about it. And this is going to relate a lot to what Dig's roster is. I think a lot of people... Okay, let me just say this. Before I talk about the rosters, I've been a Lakers fan for a really long time. Before I ever played League or anything like that, I was always a Lakers fan. And in 2003, I want to say it's either 2003 or 2004, the Lakers went on a 3 championship win streak. And then they added a bunch of old, really good players to their team. They added Karl Malone, which is one of the greatest players of all time, and Gary Payton, another one of the all-time greats. They added them to their team while they were still pretty decent. They're still putting up numbers. It wasn't just like an old man tour that got minutes. They were playing. It was their last year, but they were wanting to get a championship, and they were playing hard. And from all signs, they completely upgraded their roster. They didn't really lose any key pieces. They just put all these old guys together who are amazing talents, who could run a team, who could get a team to their playoffs by themselves. And they lost to the Detroit Pistons, who were a ragtag team of a couple solid players, a couple of role players, and a couple of nobodies. And they lost to the Detroit Pistons. And then the Lakers in 2010 through 12, they went to the finals every year, and they won 2 of the championships. And then after that, they had a really down year. And then they added Steve Nash and Dwight Howard to their team, which both were all-star players. Dwight Howard's an MVP of the week, and got to the finals. Steve Nash is a 2-time MVP of the week. I don't think Dwight Howard's been an MVP of the week, but Steve Nash is a 2-time MVP of the week. And they're joining their team from all sides, upgraded the roster. They didn't lose anybody from their championship roster except for Lamar Odom, who was just off the team anyway. He was out of basketball. He had been done playing. And they got 8th in the West. They barely qualified because Kobe Bryant was playing every single minute of the game and was dropping 40 points a game. 40 points a game for like 10 games in a row as a 40-year-old player. And he blew out his Achilles to get them to the playoffs. Okay, whole reason of me bringing this shit up is I am so skeptical when I see all these old players who formerly were great or even are still great. By the way, they could still be great. And they just all come together and it doesn't work. And I think about that when I saw that Misfits roster last year. I was like, okay, this roster looks really cool, but I think they're going to be really terrible because I have a bias because I'm a Lakers fan. And so every time I see one of these old teams brought together, I know they're going to be awful. Doesn't mean the players are bad. I just know it's not going to work. And I think there's a lot of issues with some intangibles with how like all these like strong-minded people who have a bunch of vast experiences from different viewpoints come together and they have to unite as one. I think there has to be a lot of things that come together to make those types of situations work. The best teams have always shown, the best teams ever has always been shown, or not always, but most of the time, not always, but most of the time are teams that combine, old players with a lot of experience who are really great still, and then young players that are like rising stars. Those have always been the formula for some of the best teams, has always been that. You have your 2-star players, something like that. Maybe like a role player, and you have some rising stars on the team. And that is always, not always, but has been the most easiest formula for success, not just pack all these players who are solid together. The only reason why I'm bringing it up is because I have to talk about Soaz, and I don't think it's his fault that Misfits were awful last year. They were awful. You'd watch their games, and it made me feel sad, but I also don't really like that team, so I was happy when they were losing, but it also made me feel bad. I was happy that I knew that they would be bad, and everybody said they were going to be the best team in the league. So yeah, that's why I had to bring it up. Soaz is a great player. We didn't get to see much from last year, but he's a great player. He can play weak side, he can play strong side. He's a great player. And I have full confidence that he's going to have a good year. Think about what this roster was, because they took over the spot of Optic. Dokla was the top laner before. Now you have Soaz. Okay, I'll take that every day of the week. Okay, we have Xmithy. I think Xmithy speaks for himself. I don't need to talk about Xmithy. Xmithy's a great player. I think the biggest question mark for this team is going to be Ica, and the way Ica plays. I don't know anything about Ica. I don't know anything about Ica. I know he's a French player. That's all I know. I know nothing, so I'm not going to comment on it. But I know they have Soaz and Xmithy. I do know, however, a lot about Alltech. So if you have only been following LCS, if you have been following LCS for the past couple of years, Alltech used to be the bottom laner for Echo Fox. And he's been on a bunch of different teams. He's been on Dig before, so like that, and did not play well. And if you notice, Alltech didn't play last year. Alltech went to Korea and has been grinding solo queue by himself, not with a team or anything like that, and it was in the top of Challenger and has been grinding, brother. Has been grinding. I have so much respect for that. He took a year off of professional play and just went and practiced on his own, unprompted, didn't give up, and is working hard. I have so much respect for that. And since he did that, I have confidence that he's going to be a much better player than he was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he was bottom half of the league, was just kind of a do-nothing AD carry, did okay in all forms of the game, wasn't a detriment to your team, but didn't really do much either. I have full confidence he's a much better player than that, and I'm excited to see him play again. So that's why I think he definitely could be a top half AD carry. Could also just be a bottom half AD carry, but I don't think he will. I think he's done a lot of growing up, improved a lot, and I'm excited to see him back, excited to see what he can do. All right, we have Hakuho right here, and so everybody knows what Hakuho can do. He plays the hooking champions, the engaged champions. He also plays a lot of Morgana and Karma. Very decent player, decent in lane for sure. So decent in lane, great in team fights, great with pick comps, that type of stuff. I have confidence he's going to be a good player this year and stuff like that. So I'm fine with his roster. I think the biggest question mark is Ica. I think they have a lot of ways they can win the game. I think they don't have a really super clear win condition. The reason why it's really hard to gauge what their win condition be with this team is because I don't know Ica at all. So, and Alltech hasn't played in a year. And I don't know what type of player he's going to be when he plays. Before, he was just a do-nothing AD carry. What if he's not a do-nothing AD carry anymore? Then he can snowball through mid and bottom. What if Ica's a beast? I don't know. I don't know these things. What if he's like Broken Blade and he's a great player and he comes over here and just starts solo killing all the mid laners, like Broken Blade did last year? If he does, then this team can do a lot of stuff. Xmithy can play with that information. Soaz is fine with playing weak side. He loves playing strong side. He can play strong side with Soaz, play around Rift Heralds. This team looks okay, but Ica is the biggest question mark. If Ica is trash, this team is bottom tier team. If Ica is great, then this team is great. This team is a mid-tier team, a playoff hopeful. But I think just looking at this team, probably a playoff hopeful team. And that's why I have them here. Next, we're going to look at Dig. So Dig reminds me a lot of the Lakers and a lot of misfits. But I still want to give them the benefit of the doubt and all that good stuff, because that is just like a prejudice from me of a bunch of old players coming together. I have a problem with that. So let's look at this. We have Hooni right here. I think Hooni speaks for himself. I think Hooni had a great last year. You know, a lot of people are kind of down on Hooni a little bit, but he was trying a bunch of different styles, trying to play a little bit more for his team. And then his team was playing through him and DeMonte whenever they made their playoff run. I think Hooni is a great player. If you listen to the Dive podcast, I talked a lot about, you know, kind of the aura of like Hooni, the god of top lane type of stuff has kind of fallen away. I agree. I think he's definitely top laner. I think top lane is pretty strong in the LCS right now. And I don't quite know what's going to happen with Hooni this year. I think he's going to do great. Honestly, if I had to guess, I think he's going to do great. And everybody knows Hooni, so you should know what they expect. You can play through him. You can play off of him. You can play weak side. It's probably better if you play strong side with him, but I think he's great. Okay, now we have Grig. So I said I would talk more about Grig right here. I've always been a believer in Grig. Whenever he'd get his stage time, he always looked good, specifically the Hecarim games that we'd watch. They'd always win those games. I've always thought Grig was a decent player, and maybe in a better team environment, better team situation, maybe he'll do better. So I think he's, middle of the pack jungler. But and I think that's probably he's going to be a ceiling this year. But I think he's a pretty decent player. I don't think he's bottom of the league or anything like that. I think he can mix it up with everybody. I think Greg for sure can mix it up with everybody. I don't think he's like clearly the bottom. I think a lot of people will have him as like bottom of the league jungler, but I think he can mix it up with, the likes of Santorin, Closer, Blabber, people like that. I think he can definitely mix it up with those guys. So, yeah. Next we have Froggen. Everybody knows Froggen. He loves his mages. I've never been hot on Froggen. If I'm being, I've said I'm being completely honest like a million times, but if I'm being completely honest, I've never really been hot on Froggen. I think he's a solid player, and when you watched Golden Guardians last year, they always won through Haunter and Froggen. I do definitely think he's a solid player, probably top 5, not middle of the pack, mid laner. If I had to pick where he would be, so just a solid player. You can play through him. I think playing through him and playing through your solos on this team would be fine. And so I think they have some win conditions with that, and I think they're going to pick up a lot of wins because Froggen loves those scaling compositions. Aphromoo usually plays more for team fight focus. I think they're going to pick up a lot of wins in spring, early in spring, because of that, because that's an easy way to win the game is to pick a little bit more relaxed comps and then play around objectives a little bit better. So I think they'll pick up a lot of wins because of that, much like Golden Guardians picked up a lot of wins at the beginning of last year because they're playing kind of an easier style. But, just middle of the pack, mid laner for me, honestly. Okay, Johnson. So if you don't know Johnson, he used to be TSM Johnson and has long been one of the best solo queue players for the past couple of years. He has like 5 different accounts that are 1K Challenger last year. I'm really hyped to see him play. I really don't know what type of player he is. I didn't watch any of his academy games. I don't watch his solo queue VODs or anything like that. Watching 80 carry VODs is the most boring thing in the world. Unless you're watching Uzi, then it's very exciting. But the most boring thing in the world for me is watching 80 carry VODs. Unless you're watching Uzi or Deft, then it's actually like, oh my God, this guy's perfect. But I'm very hyped for Johnson. I really don't know what type of player he is. If he's more of a Stix A double if type of player, a player that wants to punish you, or if he's more of, like a sneaky Sven, bang type of player, more of a sit back, get your items and then play perfect in team fights. I don't know which type of player he is. But I'm really hyped for him to be in the league. Playing with Aphromoo is a little bit concerning, because Aphromoo is not really a lane focused support, and sometimes that's kind of hard for newer players to play with non-lane dominant supports. I think it's better for new AD carries to play with lane dominant supports to learn to play aggressive as a new player, learn how to play aggressive, and also just feel empowered, so you can gain your confidence. I think is important. And so I'm a little bit concerned on how that's going to work. Other thing I'm concerned with this team is I think they have a couple different ways to win the game. They can play through solos, play weak side bottom lane, play through mid, take the mid lead to bottom. I think there's a lot of ways for them to win the game. Just where I'm concerned is kind of some of the intangibles, which I don't like to talk about a whole lot because obviously I'm not involved with the teams and the players directly. But I'm a little concerned with the intangibles, and this is a lot of the problems with those type of teams where you put a lot of old legacy players together. It's kind of hard to get one voice and get one leader. And when you have players like Hooni, Froggen, and Afromo, people are going to have strong opinions about the game. People want to talk a lot, that type of stuff. People with the egos. I think it can be hard sometimes. I think that's why those teams fail a lot of the times. But if you get it right, it can be right. I'm not saying that's going to go wrong. I think that's why it's hard to have those types of teams come together. I think you have to have a strong voice bring together. Maybe Think Card can do the job. Maybe the rest of the players will just believe in one player, believe in the coach, and we can make it happen. That's how those teams make it happen. Maybe it will, but I'm just concerned is all. Okay, let's talk about 100T. Let's talk about 100T. Man, we've been recording for about an hour now. Let's go, dude. Let's talk about 100T. Wow, I look like I'm sinking. Have I been looking like this the whole time? That is crazy. Okay, 100T. Let's look at the roster. So we got Someday. Someday kind of speaks for himself, but we'll talk more about how their team works in a minute. We got Meteos. Meteos is back on 100 Thieves. Hype. Meteos, obviously Optic didn't do that great last year, but Meteos looked great in those games. I think Meteos and Crown looked like the best players on that team last year. They were just stuck in EVO hell. From being honest. You have Dokwa and Arrow and Big were the other players on the team. All players that are not on rosters anymore. Dokwa's an academy, but I like Dokwa, but Big Dokes. But now Meteos will be playing with Someday, Cody Sun again, and then Ryoma. Okay, so we have Someday and Meteos. So Meteos had a great year last year. I definitely think it's an upgrade from Amazing. I think Meteos kind of speaks for himself. Great jungler, great pathing jungler, great teamfight jungler. Just overall great player, and I never understood why he ever left the team. All right, Ryoma is going to be the biggest question mark. I've seen him play a couple times, but I couldn't really tell you, how he's going to fare in the league. I think that's a big question mark for the team. Okay, we have Cody Sun, definitely a team fight focus 80 carry. And then we have Stunt, who didn't play last year. He played in Academy. And he's also a solo queue grind lord who has a bunch of different accounts in 1K Challenger. Some stuff that I've heard from some of the players and from some of the analysts, stuff like that. A lot of players have not liked playing with Stunt, has been like an intangible. I'm not going to read into that too much because I don't know anything about that. Also, this team has the god himself, Papa Smithy, at the helm. So I'm confident if there's any communication issues or any like player relationships issues, then the god himself, Papa Smithy, is going to solve this stuff. So I'm really not worried about the intangibles of bringing Cody Sun and Meteos back onto 100 Thieves, because before, whenever they had been kicked off the team, that was the reason why, was intangible issues, not actual gameplay related issues. But I think with Papa Smithy at the helm, that won't be a problem anymore. I think any issues that they'll have with the players and the staff, or player to being player, is going to be resolved. So I have full confidence in that. I think the big question mark for this team is Ryoma, because you have some good things that you can do. So you can have, Meteos Someday carry. If Ryoma is able to play with the jungler and is up to snuff to mix it up with all the other mid laners, and you can play a solo focused game, get Cody Sun as items, and play for team fights. There's ways this team can win. The only thing that's concerning is, Someday has been the best player on 100 Thieves forever, and they've never played through him before. There were games that Someday would 1v9 himself. I watched Academy games of Someday where I felt bad for him, how bad he was having to 1v9 these games. He's definitely the best player on this team. Meteos and Cody Sun are also great. But they have never played through Someday, and I don't know if that's the type of player he likes to be. So I don't know why that is. There must be a reason why that they never play through Someday. And when I was watching the dive, they talked a lot about, they've tried it before and it didn't work. I've watched so much, and I feel like I've never actually seen them truly invest into playing through solos on 100 Thieves with Someday on the team. So I don't think I've actually ever really seen it. But I think this team has a lot of win conditions. I think the biggest question mark is Ryoma. If I had to say like a ceiling for this team, it's probably like a high B tier. I don't think they can compete with TSM or Team Liquid. I really don't think they can unless there's a massive collapse in one of those teams. But I think they're definitely a top of the half team if everything goes together, right? But if things don't go together, they could be 10th place. I think it'd be hard to see someday on a team that's in 10th place. I don't think it will happen. I think they're more likely just going to be a bottom tier playoff team. So a bottom half playoff team. I think they're going to be a playoff team. That's all I'm going to say. I think they're going to be a playoff team. But there's a lot of teams I think will be playoff teams. So it's kind of tough. I think all the teams I've done so far are solid teams. We have some much better teams up here. And then we have some, a little bit, still pretty good teams right here. And then some solid teams right here. I think this is the only part where we get into not very good teams. I don't think any team in the LCS this year is actually bad. Sometimes there's some really pooper teams, like really bad teams, like really awful teams. I don't think there's any really awful team. So let's do, what do I want to put first? Oh, let's look at the rosters again. Keith Mcbreath. Oh, man. Keith Mcbreath. All right, we're going to do... I think we got to do FlyQuest. Instead of Golden Guardians. I think we got to do FlyQuest. All right, we're going to do FlyQuest at 9th. Okay. Cool. Let's do it. All right. Viper. We have Viper, Santorin. Okay. Viper looked great last year. They did some cool stuff in spring, and I think he grew in the summer. I think he's still growing as a player. I'm very hot on Viper. I watch a lot of his streams. I think he's a good player. I think he could be top lane. I think LCS is really top, like have pretty strong top laners. You have Broken Blade, Haunter, Hooni, Someday, Licorice, Ruin, Soaz, Impact. I think top lane is pretty stacked. And Viper can mix it up with all those guys. Could be top half of the league. For sure. But I think if you were the 6th best top laner in the league, that'd still be fine. I don't think there's a big differences between all the top laners. I think they're all pretty close. Except for maybe a couple are at the smaller. Like I think probably Kuhmo's 10th. If I had to rank them 1 through 10, it'd be like Kuhmo and Ruin at the bottom. And then probably Viper next, maybe. But it'd be close. It'd be Viper or Haunter, probably. But yeah, Viper is really solid. And Santorin had a great spring. And then in summer, it just seemed like he was a farm bot and didn't do anything and nothing happened. I don't know what happened to FlyQuest in summer. But it did not look good. I still have confidence that Santorin's a good player and he can make some plays with Viper. And maybe Viper has grown into, maybe built some better synergies, that type of stuff. Okay, we have Power of Evil. This is a weird roster move. I think Pole Belter's a better player. I would rather have Pole Belter on this team. I don't think Power of Evil does anything that Pole Belter... I don't think he does anything better than Pole Belter. I don't think any part of the game of Power Evil is better than any part of the game as Pole Belter. I see this as a downgrade for sure. Not like heavily, but I'd rather have Pole Belter if I had to pick. Wild Turtle's still on the team. I love Wild Turtle. He's the face of the team. He's the leader of the team. All that good stuff. I think he's a very decent player. Could be top half 80 carry. Also could just be bottom half 80 carry. I think he's middle of the pack 80 carry. But I think he's pretty good. He's fine. Ignar. If you're unfamiliar with Ignar, he was on that Misfits roster that had that awesome Worlds run where they took SKT to 5 games. He was also on BBQ for a minute. And then that team got relegated. And then he was on Schalke last year, and that team was pretty decent for most of the year. And then kind of fell apart at the end of the year. Ignar has always been a player who's not necessarily lane focused, but he has some really clean mechanics and can do some cool stuff in lane. Everybody remembers the MF play into the Misfortune and Ashe lane. He played Leona into MF and Ashe with Fervor forever ago. It was like the OG play. Ignar is a very interesting player to watch. A lot of players and a lot of coaches and analysts will say that he's an awful player, while also a lot of people will say he's an amazing player. He's one of the best at his position. He's such a polarizing player, because he does all this weird stuff. So he'll sack doing like the correct thing for making a really creative play. You'll look away from the screen for 1 second and like the teams will be fighting over here, like getting ready for a fight in the mid lane. And you'll see Ignar like behind the enemy red buff. Like they're the red side team and they're fighting the blue side. The blue side team's the enemy. And the people are here and you'll see them like all the way down here looking for this like 1000 IQ flank. It's actually crazy when you watch Ignar sometimes. He's such a flashy player. Do I think he's gonna like carry this team or anything like that? No. I've never seen Ignar as like this crazy carry player. I've always seen him as he's willing to like look for like, you know, if they have a 10% chance of winning the game, he's willing to look for the play that is going to give them that 10% chance of winning, you know? Like he's willing to find what that 10% is and get it for his team so they win the game. But in terms of like consistently carrying a team and, you know, bringing it together, I've never seen Ignar as that type of player. I've always seen him as 1000 IQ, big brain play. When he pulls it off, it looks amazing. When he doesn't, what are you doing, Ignar? I've always seen him as that type of player. So how does this team win? I don't know. I don't know. That's why they're a D tier team. I don't know how they're better than the other teams. I definitely think they can get wins, creative wins. You know, they have a pretty similar roster than they have last year. And they would find a lot of their wins with like TP flanks and creative plays and kind of like, you know, kind of enemies make mistakes and you punish them, which is kind of a bad way to play League nowadays. I don't know, man. They're just not a good team. They don't seem like a good team. Maybe they'll prove us wrong, but they don't seem very good. All right, now we have the Golden Guardians. I want this team to be good so bad. I love Anero and I love Raz. I love Hanser. I love Golden Glue. Golden Glue is one of my favorite players. But man, I just don't see it. I think Golden Glue is a legit player. I think he's a legit player. When he was on Cloud9 and they'd put him in, he looked good. When they put him in the finals or in the playoffs, they just put him on like Malzahar and shit like that. So it was hard to tell. But when they put him in as a Swole Bro duo, I thought he looked so good. Honestly, I thought he looked so good. And I was so excited to watch him play. And I love Grayson Gilmer, okay? I think he's a great player. I think Haunter is a great player. Haunter was the sole reason, him and Froggen were the reasons why Golden Guardians could ever pick up wins last year. Definitely the best player on Golden Guardians last year. Closer, I'm not very hot on Closer, but I was never hot on Contracts. I never thought Contracts was a good player. I mean, I'm not saying he's not a good player, but man, he makes some boneheaded plays. And even when he was on Cloud9, like I would just see him get bodied by Svenskeren, and when Svenskeren was on TSM, and that was like when Svenskeren wasn't even playing well, and I'd watch games of him just bodying Contracts. And I thought a lot of his success was just built off of having Impact and Jensen as your solo laners, which having strong solo laners can do that for you. Like, you know, and he had strong solo laners last year and would make some really boneheaded plays. Like maybe there were team calls, but I don't know, man. Like do some really weird level 3 Krugs invades and shit like that. Like super confusing. So I was never hot on Contracts. Never was hot on Contracts. I don't really want to shit on him too much, but I was never hot on Contracts. Closer, on the other hand, I'm also not hot on either. I watched him play in the TCL a little bit, you know, at Worlds, and I've seen some TCL VODs. I try to watch like the finals of every league. I watched like the Japan finals last year. It was really weird. But I'm not really hot on Closer. I've watched a lot of his streams with Broken Blade and with Golden Glue. I don't know. I'm just not hot on him. I think he just has to prove it to me. I don't know how he stacks against the other junglers. I'm just skeptical. I'm very skeptical. I think he's probably going to be bottom half jungler. Maybe middle of the pack. I don't see him as like a top jungler. He was the MVP of the TCL, but I don't know how much that says for you. Okay, after that we have Golden Glue, who I've talked about so much already. I think he's just a great player. I think he's a middle of the pack mid laner. Maybe could be top 4. Whenever he was playing that one year, I remember them talking about the best 3 mid laners in the league were Bjergsen, Jensen, and Golden Glue in no particular order, but two of the best mid laners were on the same team. That was awesome. I loved when that was happening. I think he's a great player. FBI. I watched him in OS, and I watched him when he played at Worlds a couple years ago. At MSI, I believe. I love FBI as a player. I think he's very good. Last year, whenever he started getting starting time, after they dropped Deathly, it was really weird. He was basically only playing Varus, basically a one trick, and they started banning that, and they couldn't get wins after that. So I would imagine he's expanded his champion pool, but when he got his champions, he looked very good. When he got Varus, he looked so good. And so maybe he's expanded his champion pool and he'll play a little better. And he was also playing with a Phil support. And this year he's playing again with the Phil support again. So let's talk about Keith Mcbreath. So Keith Mcbreath is playing 80. He previously was an 80 carry and is playing support. Longtime 80 carry player. I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I mean, Core JJ, he was an average 80 carry player and then role swapped to support and was one of the best in the world and has been forever. So, hey, man, maybe it'll work out. And you also both played on Dig before. I believe Keith played on Dig before. You've both played on Dig before. So, hey, man, maybe it'll work out. Okay, guys, I have been talking for an hour, and I'm going to end this soon now. So let's just review real quick. We have, I'm going to number these now. We have Team Liquid at number 1, TSM at number 2, Cloud9 number 3, COG number 4, Evil Geniuses number 5, Immortals number 6, Dignitas 7, a 100T at 8th, FlyQuest at 9th, and Golden Guardians at 10th. I'm so unsure about this group of 4, actually, Evil Geniuses, and here I'm so unsure about that. I'm also unsure about these two. I think Team Liquid's the odds-on favorite, but I really think this might be TSM's year. And I think Cloud9 can go either here, anywhere from here to here. Can go anywhere from S tier to B tier. I think it's more likely that Team Liquid's going to win the whole thing. No, that's a lame answer. But I really think TSM and Cloud9 are legitimate challengers, while COG is like an outside challenger. And I think these bottom 4 teams right here are just playoff hopefuls. Most of them will be in the playoffs. And these 2 teams, they're just trying to figure some shit out. I don't know. I don't know what these teams are doing. They're improving? I don't know. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching the video. I'm not going to be making a tier list for LEC or LCK. I'm only going to be doing it for the LCS, mostly because I've watched every single weekend of LCS for the past 3 years. I've watched almost every single broadcast of LCK for the past 2 years. They do a weird broadcast because they broadcast 4 days a week rather than 2 to 3. And they just do 2 series a night. So I don't catch every single night, obviously, but I've been watching most series of the LCK for the past 2 years. I don't think any of my viewers are very interested in LCK. I've done a lot of LCK content before and people weren't that interested. So it's probably the league I watched the most, honestly. And then I've watched sparingly the LEC for the past 5 years, like sparingly. And I used to watch LCS sparingly for 2 years before I really started to watch it. And I've only watched it really seriously just this past year, and I'm going to continue that this year. So I just don't feel that qualified to, speak on making tier lists or power rankings for LEC. And I don't think anybody would care about the LCK stuff, so I'm not going to do LCK. And I haven't really been paying all that much to LCK roster moves because LCK is a little bit further out. So I've been just kind of taking it easy on LCK. I watched Kespa Cup, but just taking it a little bit more easy on LCK. So I'm only doing LCS. So, hey guys, if you like this video and you like this type of content and stuff like that, then make sure you guys subscribe. I'm so close to 1,000 subscribers, and that's really huge for me because that's when you can apply to be on the YouTube Partner Program. You have to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time, and I have 20,000 hours of watch time. I'm killing it in watch time, but I just need to get to the subscribers. So If you guys did like this, please subscribe. I normally don't ask, but I'm actually really close. And as soon as I get it, I can apply. And it's like a 3-week application process to get your monetization set up and everything like that. So I've done this before. So it'd be much appreciated. And I'm going to be making a lot more pro content. If you guys are any of my longtime subscribers, you've noticed I've not been uploading a lot or even doing my weekly updates. It's just, if you made it this far and you're listening, that's kind of weird. But, you know, I'll just say this right here. Mentally for me, I have to distance myself from my YouTube channel a little bit in order for me to do it. You know, I've always had to distance myself from work in order to be able to do it. So that's just kind of what I've been doing a little bit. And I know if you're like a longtime viewer and you want to be a little bit closer to me and stuff, I know that that's kind of tough, but I'm going to have some more streams going where I probably won't play League, but I'll play other stuff. Just when pro play is happening, I don't play any League other than to test game balance changes. And I just play some other games. I have to like, you know, it feels like I'm working all the time. If I'm like being too involved. So just gonna have to distance myself a little bit. Okay guys, I'm gonna end this video because this is lasting forever. Thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.